Most of the time, the fields in our API match the properties in our entity, but we know that doesn't always need to be the case. In the previous tutorial, there were several times when we needed to add a custom field. For example, in cheese listing, we added a short description field to the API by adding a getShortDescription method and putting it in the cheese::read group. We did the same with setTextDescription. This added a text description field that could be written in the API. But you can only take this so far. If you need a service to calculate the value of a custom field, then you can't use this trick because these classes don't have access to services. We even tackled this in the previous tutorial. We added an isMe Boolean field to user. We did this by leveraging a custom normalizer, source serializer normalizer user normalizer. We basically added an extra field right before the array is turned into JSON. But this solution had a flaw. Look at the documentation on the user resource. I'll open the get operation, and down here, you can see the schema of what's going to be returned. It does not mention isMe. This field would be there if you tried the endpoint, but our docs have no idea it exists. And maybe you don't care. Not every app needs to have perfect docs. But what if we do care? How could we add a custom field that's properly documented? There are a few ways, like creating a completely custom API resource class or using an output DTO. We'll talk about both of these later, but in most situations, there is a simpler solution. In user resource test, if you find test get user, we do have a test that looks for the isMe field. It's false in the first test and true after we log in as this user. Copy that method name and let's just make sure it's passing. Symfony PHP bin/phpunit --filter equals test get user. Right now, it does pass. Time to break things. In user normalizer, remove the isMe property. Actually, we can just return this arrow normalize directly. This class still adds a custom group, but it no longer adds a custom field. Try the test now. A lovely failure. Okay, so what is the other way to solve this? It's beautifully simple. The idea is to create a new property inside of user, but not persist it to the database. The new property will hold the custom data, and then we will expose it like a normal field in our API. Yep, it's that easy. Oh, but there is one tiny annoying problem. If this field isn't stored in the database, and we need a service to calculate its value, how do we set it? Great question. And there are about 47 different ways. Okay, not 47, but there are a few ways, and we'll look into several of them because different solutions will work best in different situations. For the first solution, let's think about how API Platform works. When we make a request to /API/users, or really pretty much any endpoint, API Platform needs to somehow load the object or objects that we're requesting. It does that with its data provider system. So we have data persisters for saving stuff and data providers for loading stuff. There are both collection data providers for loading a collection of objects and item data providers that load one object for the item operations. Normally, we don't need to think about this system because API Platform has a built-in Doctrine data provider that handles all of it for us. But if we want to load some extra data, a custom data provider is the key. In the source directory, let's see, make a new data provider directory, and inside, create a new PHP class called user data provider. The idea is that this class will take full responsibility for loading user data. Well, for now, just the collection user data. Add two interfaces: Context-Aware Collection Data Provider Interface, yep, that's a huge name, and also Restricted Data Provider Interface. Before we talk about these, I'll go to the Code Generate menu or Command N on a Mac, click Implement Methods, and select both methods that are needed. So, to create a collection data provider, the only interface that you should need, in theory, is something called Collection Data Provider Interface. If you jump into Context-Aware Collection Data Provider Interface, it extends that one. We've seen this kind of thing before. There's the main interface and then an optional stronger interface. If you implement the stronger one, it adds the context argument to the getCollection method. So, if your data provider needs the context, you need to use this interface. I'll show you why we need the context in a few minutes. The Restricted Data Provider Interface is actually what requires the supports method. If we didn't have that, API Platform would use our data provider for every class, not just the user class. Let's add our logic. Return resource class equals user : class. Perfect. Up in getCollection, as its name suggests, our job is to return the array of users. So, simple, right? We just need to query the database and return every user. Well, that's not going to be quite right, but it's close enough for now. Add a public function __ construct and autowire user repository. I'll do my Alt-Enter trick and go to initialize properties to create that property and set it. Now, in getCollection, return this arrow user repository arrow find all. Sweet, let's try it. We still haven't added the isme field, so instead of trying the test, let's do this in the browser. Go to /API/users.jsonld. And if you get the full authentication is required, that's our security system in action. Go team! In another tab, I'll go back to my homepage and hit log in. Refresh the original tab again. Sweet! It's working! But is it actually using our new data provider? Well, if you look closely, you can see that we lost something. Pagination. Oh, I'm totally looking at the wrong spot here. These are the embedded cheeses for the first user. Scroll down, Ryan. Well, if I had scrolled down, we would have seen that all 50 users are being listed. But normally, pagination only shows 30 at a time. So this proves that our data provider is being used. And that's thanks to auto configuration. If you create a service that implements Collection Data Provider Interface, API Platform will automatically find it and start calling its supports method. So that's great. But the fact that we lost pagination and filtering is not so great. Our API documentation still advertises that pagination and filtering exist, but it's a lie. None of that would work. It turns out that the core Doctrine data provider is also responsible for reading the page and filter query parameters and changing the query based on them. We don't want to lose that just to add a custom field. So next, let's use our favorite trick, class decoration, to get that functionality back. Then we can add our custom field.